Okay, so it's February 15th and 2022, and this is the 11th meeting of the Westborough Town Seal Review Committee. It is 7:30 p.m. as I said. We are in the Forbes Municipal Building, second floor, room 207. The first thing I'd like to do is to call, I'd like us to accept the minutes from the January 6th, 2022. That was the Zoom meeting that we held. So I'll entertain a motion to accept them unless someone has changes to it.
Make a motion to accept the minutes, January 6th.
If someone to say, to second that? All those in favor of accepting the January 6th, 2022 minutes, can you raise your hand, please?
I was going to abstain.
And you, Dan, will abstain.
Abstain.
Okay. And Eric abstains. Okay. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of us accept them, 2 abstentions. Second one is to accept the minutes from the information gathering session, which was held on February 12th, 2022. This was information gathering session number 3. And again, if you want to take any addendums, any changes to those minutes, and if not, I'll accept the motion to accept those minutes. Can I have someone accept those?
I'll make a motion.
So Phyllis makes a motion, Wendy seconds. All those in favor, can you raise your hand?
I'm sorry, that was the one I was trying to
Yep.
abstain from.
That's fine. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Abstain,
Okay.
abstain, because it wasn't
So we have 4 that approve the minutes, and we have
Abstain.
3 abstentions. Everybody good about that? Let's go to our next item, which is the discussion about the information received from the third information gathering session and related correspondence. What I'd like to do first, John Arnold has asked as the town moderator to relate some correspondence that he's had. John is the appointed authority for this committee. So I'm gonna ask John to speak first, and then I have a couple of other email messages that we received as a committee, and I know I responded to these people, but I think for the public record, it would probably be beneficial to say what those pieces of correspondence were. Okay? So John?
Yeah, just so people know here. So, hi. So I didn't bring a copy of the email with me, so hopefully somebody has one. But I just wanted to relay to the committee that as I was going over my notes from when I created the committee. Before the committee was appointed, I had been approached by 2 people. I think, was it Jane Dunphy? Do you remember? Is it, yeah, I think it's Jane Dunphy, who lives at the Willows. She's an elderly, longtime resident of Westborough. And I was hoping that she was going to be able to attend the one on Saturday, since there was a van that brought one woman from the Willows, I believe, but she was not able to attend. She had actually asked that I relay her interest in giving some thoughts to the committee once it was appointed, and I'd been in touch with her and I'd talked to her. But since she hadn't been to any of the meetings yet, I was thinking that the committee may, rather than have a special meeting, and because getting her to a meeting might be difficult, my suggestion might be that the committee authorize one of the members to give her a call, take some notes, and relay her thoughts to the committee. So that was one thing. And then I'd also been approached by Ross Eldridge, who was a longtime resident of Westborough and actually was a firefighter for 30 plus years in Westborough. But more interestingly, he was one of the people who submitted artwork to the 1967 competition, and part of his artwork was actually included in the design. I forgot which piece. So he had said he was going to try to attend the Zoom meeting you had, but he didn't. I don't know if it's because the meeting didn't last very long or if just something came up. But again, I was thinking he wanted to say some thoughts, but I also thought it might be interesting to invite him to one of your future meetings so you could have a little discussion about what process happened in 1967. I know that wasn't the official town seal, but in the email he had sent me back before I appointed the committee, he had mentioned that, you know, there had been the seal. The town actually changed the colors when they approved the town seal in 1977. And so I thought if he's willing to come to a meeting, you may want to invite him or authorize one of your members to talk to him on the phone and see if he wants to come in and gather his thoughts and do that. Again, because that I thought might be more interesting, just since part of the charge was to do the history of the town seal. He may be able to answer some questions and provide some detail about how that whole contest happened. So those were just the two pieces of correspondence I knew I had from people who had indicated an interest in providing information to the committee that hadn't sent anything in yet, so I just wanted to make those known to the committee.
Does anybody have any questions for John? But you can just do this, we're small groups, I'm just
Yeah.
trying to push this along a little bit. Does anybody have an interest in speaking to Jane Duffy or Ross Eldridge?
I don't expect either one of them, or both.
I'll
It
talk
doesn't
to, I'll
matter.
talk to Ross, if you want to
Okay.
talk to Jane.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did Jane say what her,
No, I spoke to her briefly, and because the committee hadn't been appointed, I didn't ask for her opinion. I just wanted to make sure that she knew that I got her, I think either you or somebody from your office said she had called,
yeah,
and then they had typed up an email and sent it to me. So I just wanted to know that she'd been heard, but I didn't ask her what her point of view was, so.
oh.
I just know she-
I just didn't know what she had to offer.
No, all I know is when we talked, we mentioned that I knew one of her daughters back in high school days, and I think that she lived in town back in the 67, 77, still lives here.
Yeah,
So I assume it's gonna be similar to some of the other things, we'll just see what she has to say.
yeah.
So, members of the committee, we're fine with Wendy and Ian doing that?
Yep.
Okay,
Sounds good.
all right, super. All
John, do
right.
you have contact info for,
Yes, I think in the email I put, in the follow-up, because I forgot to put it, I have Russ's email address, I don't have his phone number, so, if you don't have it, let me know and I'll send it to you.
Sure.
And I believe I put in the email
Jane.
Jane's phone number, if not, I have it in an email as well. Okay, great, thanks.
All right.
I just figured, yeah, I know you've heard from a lot of people, and I just figure I want this committee to, not anyone say like, oh, somebody said they'd get in touch and they didn't, because I did tell them I passed the information along. Yeah, great, thank you.
Two other pieces of correspondence that we got, one was in mid-January, and I wrote back to Ted Gilbert, who's a resident of the community, of the town. Mr. Gilbert asked two questions. One was why our email addresses were not, why we were asking for email addresses on town surveys, and why we were asking for not email addresses, excuse me, street addresses. Why we were asking for street addresses, and why we were asking for that at public hearings. And I wrote back and said that this was protocol that has been done at town meetings, and it was a way for us to verify that the person was from the town. Mr. Gilbert didn't agree with that, but I did explain that. I also then added in another email, Wendy had reminded me that all of our street addresses, I keep saying email, sorry, all of our street addresses are public record. All of us had to submit those when we applied to be on this committee, and those are obtainable through the town clerk's office. The second question Mr. Gilbert brought up was how much will, let's say if the committee was to vote to replace the town seal, how much would it cost? I replied in that message to say we had not talked about that at any length and with any seriousness. Now, I know the question also came up on the 12th at the information gathering session, and Phyllis gave a much better answer than I did in reply to that question from the resident who brought that up, who I think was Guido Leonardo.
Yeah, I think we.
Yeah. So do you want to, I'm just thinking about the fact Dan and Eric were not there and Ian
Oh,
wasn't there. So
well-
do you want to just repeat that? Because I guess my question.
Well, we can go into our minutes again.
Yeah.
My response to him at the time was that it was my recollection that very early on in one of our initial meetings, we discussed the question, or the question came up, what kind of a cost would this involve? And the bottom line was, with some input from Wendy, literally the only absolute cost involved is the cost of a new embosser. Any other additional cost where people are using the town seal could be phased in over time. So if there is in fact stationery or uniforms or vehicles that have the town seal, as they are replaced, a new town seal would be substituted. So that at least in a general sense, our general sense is that the only out-of-pocket cost to begin this process is the cost of a new embosser. Everything else will be phased in. And it's my sense that we talked about this, because I sort of didn't make that.
I do recall that.
You do recall it, yeah. I don't think I made that up. So-
No, you didn't, because I went back and looked at the minutes.
And it was
And
there?
it was there, yeah.
Okay, so it's now, again, in the minutes, is that's the only cost that we know of that is absolute. And that's it, and everything else would be phased in.
Do you know how much it is? Like just.
I threw out
Right,
$250.
yeah, right,
I don't
that's
know.
probably, 300, I don't know.
It's probably in that range.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be
Yeah.
any
I don't
much
think
more
so.
than that. I mean, we're
And I
not
think
talking
it's-
$1,500.
No, and I think it's just a
2,000.
little replacement to what we already have for the press, part of it is
Oh,
just a
there
little
you
connect.
go, it would just be
Yeah.
this, other, it's probably even
itself.
less than
Yeah,
that.
could be.
God, could be less
Well,
than that.
but there is.
I was thinking the whole thing.
But there would be design costs, how.
Well, that gets into a whole different question, which is if we were to recommend
Yes.
a change in the seal, then you have a different ball of wax, because how is that going to be done? Are we going to, is the group that decides how that's going to be done, hire a I mean, there are other costs that could, down the road, be there that we're not talking about. But the quick and dirty answer is a new embosser,
Okay, all right.
and that's it.
Okay. So, okay, so let's leave it at that for now.
Yeah.
I suspect we might come back to that at some point. Well, we might have to come back to that if we get,
Well, if we make a recommendation
Yeah.
to change the seal, then there's a whole different discussion about how, but that's not part of our charge.
right, right.
So again, it's not part of our charge. That would be the next committee's charge, to determine those costs.
Right. Third piece of correspondence came from James Johnson, and he proposed that anything regarding a change to the town seal should be put to a vote in the community rather than the process that's been established through the town meeting. Wendy contacted the town manager's office. The town manager provided this piece of information back, saying that the Mass General Law, Title 7, Chapter 40, Section 47, specifically says this, quote, "Our reading of the law is that anything regarding the town seal requires a town meeting vote." And if you were to reference that particular law that's on the Massachusetts website, it's quite clear that that's the case. So that's why the community went this route. So again, I'm reiterating this because I know that we're being recorded, it'll make it into the minutes, and I want to make sure that that's clear. So for residents wondering why we're using this process, that's why we're doing it. With that all said, does anyone here have any other correspondence, any other questions that were brought up to them?
The only question I've had, and I think it is a question that needed to be reiterated tonight, and it was on Saturday, is curiously enough, when I've spoken with groups of people, the cost question is one that comes up consistently. So I think that we all need to be prepared to answer that question, because that's a persistent question that pops up every time. I think each meeting we've had, it's popped up, and we've gotten it, from correspondence, so I think the more that we deal with that, the better off we are.
Sure.
I don't know how I guess until you have a design in mind, hiring a designer, that would be a cost right there.
Well, but that was my point
Yeah.
is, but that's not our charge, and yes, there will be additional costs.
What
but-
was the charge seemed to, I thought, not necessarily included that, but for us to give the process, I think.
The process, yeah.
Well,
Next step
if
would be-
if we do get into that, then yes, we probably would have to start looking at maybe what it would cost to hire a designer to do it. But so far, we're not there because we haven't decided whether it's to be
Right,
changed or
right.
not changed yet. So first things first.
So why don't we move into the next part, which is the discussion about the information received from the third information gathering session. And the way the agenda is set up is, so remember, we put this together back in January, and we parsed out, discussed the review survey results from outreach and responses from different stakeholders. I think we could I think we should stick to what's in this agenda, and I suspect it's going to kind of blend into the other part. So without delaying this, what was your reaction? We've had other information gathering sessions also, but what was your reaction to the information that came from the third information gathering session? What was your reaction? Any comments, any ideas?
I think people were a little more open than they had been, and were expressing more how they felt.
Were there some of the same folks at this meeting that you could tell that were at earlier meetings? or-
By
There
my
were
count, there were
a
two.
couple of
One
repeats,
or
but
There
there
were
were some
two.
new ones. There were some new people there.
Was it all residents of the senior center or
There
no?
were none. There was
residents.
one, I would say there was one, well, if Guido counts. It was Guido and that other woman were seniors. No, the rest were not. The rest were not. They were general public.
Interesting.
And we had about a dozen people, which was a nice turnout,
Yeah.
considering it was a gorgeous day.
Yeah, I was surprised.
I guess I was. It was a beautiful day, so. It was actually a decent turnout.
Anything let's talk about the content of what we heard, and maybe we can and this is fine, we can talk about what we've heard now. As far as numbers, I had written down that we had 14 people at that one, so
This one, okay.
that's what I counted, but we had 25 at the first one, 4 at the second, so that's 29, and then 14 at the third one.
And I think our Zoom, there were 2 people that showed up
There
to
were
the
2.
Zoom.
Okay, so 2, so 2.
I think there were 2.
There were two that spoke, there was one person that was on the screen but never made his presence.
Well, then that counts
known.
as a person.
I
That's
guess.
3 people.
So from 3 public hearings, we've had 41 people present. I think we ought to talk a bit about what we've gathered for content from these sessions. What's been your reaction? Now, there are a couple of ways we can do this. One is to look at so Alla Baranowski's unable to be here tonight, but Alla, so this would be the document that has I numbered the pages for this one. And Alla broke this into 2 groups. Change or keep is the way Alla broke this down. And to that end, what's been your sense of this?
She didn't total it, she just
She
has
didn't, I did it earlier today, and if I counted right, it was something like 28.6.
28 change,
Change.
6 not
Yeah.
changed.
I
What
think the most interesting thing that I heard came from the last one, and that was just about the survey. And why we didn't put just a straight up like, yes, should we change it, or no, should we keep it question.
Yeah.
I mean,
And as I tried to answer that question by saying we were looking for, let's look a little more deeply at why to keep it, why not to keep it. After looking at the results from the public information gathering sessions, I would argue we can break the responses into probably 4 buckets. There are people who want to keep it, people who do not want to keep it. Then I think if you think about it as a subset, there are some people who say, I don't like the design of the current seal. And there's overlap from people who like it and dislike it. And then there's another group that says, well, yeah, I don't mind, if we do keep it, fine. If we don't keep it, we should change it and have some other emblems on a seal. But the bulk of the people I've heard from are saying, just return to the seal from 1913.
Mm-hmm.
So I would argue there are 4, possibly 5 ways to look at this. There's a small segment there was a very small segment saying, I like the current seal, but if we were to change it, then change it back to the existing.
Well, that was that woman on
Yeah.
Saturday who was very cautious. Why don't you just put it back to the original one?
Yeah.
With the 100th town on it, which was interesting.
Yeah, so,
That also came through in the the much lengthier survey results. Those mentioned a number of times in here too.
Let's go back to that one.
So was there anything else that jumped out at you from these responses? I'm not hearing much, that's why I'm asking.
The responses and.
From the public hearing. What we did on the agenda was parse out third information gathering session relative to, I'm sorry, it's relative to the survey results and then what we got from the first and second. I guess if not, we can talk about the survey too. So when I last checked this, which was, I didn't look at it today, I looked at it 2 days ago. We had 337 responses from the survey. And the survey is posted on the town website. I was pleasantly surprised with how robust the response has been from the community. So if my addition is right, if we take into account the 41 people who came to the info sessions, there are going to be some repeaters that also posted on the survey. Then if we take into account the letters we received from the first information gathering session, there were 16 of those. And then since then, I think we've received another 6.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, am I right?
I don't know, but it wasn't a lot after
Yeah,
that first,
okay.
we had a lot the first time, and then after that, like one this past weekend.
So roughly, I'd say we're around 390, maybe give or take, 390 responses. I think that's a pretty robust response. And I'm noticing going through this, and this would be something I would suggest that you could think about, is just where are the comments falling? And again, they're falling into those 4 categories, I would argue. Unless any of you are seeing something different.
I guess this is, so I wasn't at both of these, and maybe that's actually to my advantage because what I'm about to say is more reflective of the process. The Worcester Telegram used to do this thing, is they would pose a question and ask readers to like respond, like, do you think who's gonna win the Super Bowl? And the next day they would publish the results in the pie chart. And I was always miffed by that because you couldn't have a more non-scientific poll than that, where you put the question and you ask people randomly to give you their answer, and then you have a sample of 350 or 900, and you have that. So this was the way to do it, but if we wanted to know what the average height was of people in Westborough, then if we took all these people that responded, that would be an accurate number. So I think we've kind of created maybe, and this goes to like, whether there should be a 4th session, even if it was strongly on one side or the other, and again, this is no criticism of what we did, this was the process. This is a non-scientific sampling of what people think. So I would just throw that out there, like, we can discuss it, but even if it was 80-20, it's not. It seems to be, like you said, those 4 buckets, that's what I see. So I guess I'm just, and I know that John explained all this from the very beginning, us coming together, mostly sort of humanities-based academics, not all of us, but a fair number, to show up, and then, I don't know, it seems like we're kind of ready to like proceed on and not do a 4th session, and just, I guess I feel like we've created a monster. How do we decide the validity of these? Because this is not how you would actually gather data to make a decision, you know what I mean? And again, like, this was the way we had to do it because this is how we are charged with doing it. So you see I hope you guys understand a little bit where I'm going. It's not at all critical of all that we've done.
No.
It's just like, if we want to know like what the average height of a Westborough resident is, we don't have 350 people tell us their height. It's not scientific, you know what I mean? I think the thing we've done really well is foment lots of opportunity for anyone who wants to be heard. And now I'm like, oh, how the heck are we gonna make sense of this data? because it is.
Well, I mean, the only way you could, it's like 22,000 voters in Westborough.
Yeah.
So if you sent that to every 22,000 voters and asked them to respond,
Yeah,
and, I mean, you could have it, you know, get rid of it, keep it, I don't care.
yeah. Yeah.
And because I'm sure that's what,
No, yeah,
when you really look at the numbers,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's great that we got the
So-
number that we got.
Yeah.
And that's about how many people show up at town meeting.
yeah.
And there's 22,000 people
And that's how
that are
decisions are made,
eligible
so.
to do that.
Hello,
But-
so this is how decisions are made, so it's not being overly fine, like, about sort of a more scientific approach, like, we're not, this is a more democratic
I think,
process we're going through.
I think part of the problem is, for instance, I spent some time both at a club, a local club that I grew up, I don't want to badmouth anybody, but, and I'm not badmouthing, but, you know, the women's club.
Yeah,
And I made a big deal about this several times at the women's club. And I made a big deal about this where I live, where there are, you know, 100 homes of people over 55. And in fact, had a whole long conversation on Saturday morning about the meeting and what was gonna be about the meeting and the questions. Nobody showed up from either group for anything. And I think basically, people are interested if you talk about it, but they're not, we're not gonna get them. We're not, they're just not engaged, they really don't care that much, I hate to say it. The people that care answered the survey, the people that care came to the meetings, they're the people that care that go to town meeting. And unfortunately, you're not gonna get the other people unless you go door to door, like the census taker, and knock on their door and say, do you care? And they're gonna go, what's the town seal? And then you'll show them the town seal, and they'll go, yes, no, maybe. I think we've done the best we can. We've given people more than enough opportunity. All of us have, through various contacts or something, talked up the open forums, talked about the survey. So anybody that cares has hopefully responded.
yeah.
They've had more than enough options. The other people in town, I hate to say it, but the other people in town probably don't care.
Plus, there's also, you know, all of this leads to some kind of decision being made at town meeting, which is
Well, and
another
that-
opportunity. This being our 11th meeting,
That's
all
right.
open to the public. So I guess I'm just cautious that, like, the more, if that stack here of views was thicker, it wouldn't get us any closer to like an answer, and it's just gonna complicate all that we have to do next.
I think we have enough data. I
Yeah.
won't call it data.
I do
We
apologize.
have enough information,
Yeah.
we have enough responses.
I apologize.
That we
because I'm-
have to, let's work with what we have.
Yeah. So I apologize, I'm jumping ahead a little bit to like whether we want to hold the fourth and all that, but so I'll stop talking and let that sink in, so.
I agree. I mean, I thought the same. I know how many voters there are, I know how many people go to town meeting, and I know what we got now.
It's impressive.
These are the people that care.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, they care. So do we base changing the seal on the, yeah, we spent $180 million based on 300 people voting, right? At town meeting, so I guess that is how it.
I can see in 2 years from now when we have, and I'm not trying to push this one or another, when we have a new town seal and people go, huh?
Okay.
They won't even know the difference.
Right.
I mean, most of the people in town won't even know the difference.
Yeah.
Other comments, other opinions?
I agree that we're not going to make any further progress by having an additional public gathering session. Curious to know what people would think about how much we want to push the survey, or just kind of say, we have 337 responses here, let's use that as a kind of data set.
Well, we have the other additional information too.
And
Close to
spoken
400
comments, yeah,
responses.
which I think is pretty, you know, for someone that studies 19th century sources, that's pretty fantastic to have 400 individual responses. And, you know, I think that we also have not just yes, no, we have sentiment behind the yes and no. And I think that's important. And I agree with Eric and others that I don't think we're gonna get too much more, you know, in the way of important feedback by holding additional public information sessions.
I agree that we have enough information and won't likely get more helpful information. The only thing that causes me to pause about whether or not to have another information session is like, whatever effort we end up making to kind of defend that we've done enough. And I feel like saying that we've held 4 public information sessions might be stronger than saying that we've held 3.
Well, and so would 5, I mean, we could
Sure,
keep going.
yeah.
So, because if 5 is better than 4, and then do we have to have a 5th one, you know?
But like,
If
what
we
is the
had,
number,
if
I
we
guess?
had robust turnout for these information, and I hate to say it, but as the weather gets nicer and vacations come up and things, we're not gonna get that many more people. So if we have another information session and 10 people come, an additional 10 responses, who cares? Additional 10?
I agree, yeah, I don't
And
think.
if
there
we
was
sent out
a-
another survey and got another 300, yeah, but another 10 people? Really?
We also have to consider that we've done a variety of things too. We've had in-person meetings, we've had a Zoom meeting, we've done a survey, we've reached out to a lot of people in a lot of different ways, and this is what we've got, and so we've done our job. This is, you know, the turnout, and it's good.
I think we can be proud of what we've done.
You know, I know from doing qualitative research. So as I had my doctorate, I did the qualitative research, and one of the steps that we were told was that when you start to see a lot of repetition in the types of responses you're getting, then that usually is the measure that it's time, that you've got enough and it's time to stop. So the question like in qualitative research is, how much do you need? So is it interview 5 people, is it interview 30 people, 300 people? When do you know to stop? And it's the repetition of the answers to the questions that you're asking. When you start to see that, that's usually the sign. So is this scientific in the idea of, in the ilk of political science survey? No, it's not. It's not. This is more qualitative in that we're gathering an overview of people who are concerned about the issue, giving us their opinion. That's really no different from what happens at a town meeting, or people who will come to a select board meeting, or board of health, or planning board, whatever it might be. So as far as us being consistent in trying to reach out to solicit information, I think we have been consistent. Is it scientific? I think you make an excellent point that it's not. I agree with you, it's not scientific. But we have substantial comments from a large segment of this community. And I felt on Saturday that, yes, the question and answer part, so what happened at the meeting, I said this in an email describing the session, because people had enough, because of the number of people who attended, their ability to be able to go speak, people started to ask us questions, and we started to answer some of the questions. And it was organic, but I think it was really productive. And in fact, I regret that Westborough TV didn't record that session, because I think some of the questions really provoked some good answers and decent discussion, and a couple of the questions asked made me stop and think a bit. All good. But when you start to dig down and read some of these comments, some of them are overlapping with the way what people are saying about this. So, is it scientific? No. Is it exhaustive in the way we're gathering information? I think so. That's my opinion about it. And whether we need a 4th session, we can talk about that in a moment. I want to hear from Jordan. Hi, Jordan.
Yes, it's just, since Jordan wasn't here at the beginning, I don't want to interrupt the train of thought, but I just want, here, we'll get in the camera range. So can I just take a moment to introduce Jordan?
Sure.
And let them introduce themselves?
Do you want to sit down?
No, that's fine. So anyway, so as you know, for those of you who were on Saturday, when we got into how a committee was appointed, when I appointed the 9 of you, I tried to balance people who grew up in Westborough, people who didn't grow up in Westborough, people who are younger, people who are older, and then as you know, one of our members that I appointed could never attend any meetings. So I went through the process. Candace Parsons, who couldn't attend any of the meetings, who got replaced, she was on the younger side, grew up in Westborough, so when she couldn't continue on the committee, I went back to my notes And Jordan may have been the youngest person who indicated he sent a letter of intent or a letter of interest for the committee. And so when I went to replace a member, I tried to fit in the same sort of slot. So Jordan has an interest in design, went to school in Westborough, and so you're new, Jordan, I'll let you describe yourself and your background a little bit rather than me trying to remember it. But anyway, I just wanted to let you know. So I know Jordan said he's trying to catch up on the past meetings. You've read some of the minutes and whatever, so I just wanted to let you know Jordan, very welcome to the committee, and was one of the people that, right on the cusp of when I had to choose the 9. So Jordan, welcome to the committee.
Hi everyone, I'm Jordan. I grew up here in Westborough my entire life pretty much, my whole childhood at least. Went to the high school here, class of 2015. Then I went off to college and came back, living with my parents still, but right around the time I was starting to try to find a job and then start moving out, COVID happened, and so that kind of pushed everything down the line a while. So I live here in town, grew up here in town. I studied audio engineering in college, and my interest in design is really just a hobby, kind of, but I am also happy to, I've been to town meetings, so I'm interested in civic participation, and I'm happy to be here to serve on the committee.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And we're delighted that you're here.
How about we go around and we can all tell Jordan our names?
Sure, that's a great idea.
Jordan, yep, welcome. My name is Eric Waite.
I'm Nick Archino. We met on Saturday.
I'm Dan Lambert, nice to meet you.
Jenna Casella.
Phyllis Jaffe.
Ian Delahanty.
Wendy Mecco.
And we're missing Ala Baranowski tonight.
George, one thing Wendy mentioned, have you been sworn in yet?
Yes, I have.
Oh, you have, okay.
Okay. Did Debbie,
Do you know who, Wendy didn't swear you in?
did I swear you in?
Yep.
I do so many.
Yes.
I did,
Yes.
okay.
Just check your notes.
Yikes.
Yeah, so Wendy, check your notes. 'cause
Yikes.
if
No,
you-
no, okay.
If it's not written down.
I just remember your face, but I don't remember actually doing this one yet.
Oh,
So good.
Yeah, you want to make sure
One
before
other
you vote,
thing
you have to be
I-
sworn in. That's the only reason it matters.
One other thing I think I ought to mention is that non-binary and my pronouns are they, them.
Oh, thanks for saying.
Thank you. Have you had I'm not trying to put you on the spot, and and no is a fine answer. Okay. Have you had a chance to digest any of these comments that, through the surveys?
Some of them, but not exhaustively.
No worries, okay, no worries. Yeah, and if you have an opinion, you saw where the discussion was going. If you have an opinion, you're certainly welcome to speak up and what have you. We're a small group, and this committee has worked very, very well together. We've had moments where we disagree, which is going to be normal, but we've worked very well together, so.
And these meetings aren't as structured as Saturdays. So Saturdays was structured as a public information session. These are much more just discussion oriented, where you raise your hand or interject and whatever. So
And-
you'll get the flow as you, that's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I was at the previous, I did attend the previous meeting over Zoom at the end of January. That was between the time when John reached out to me about asking if I was still interested and before I was sworn in.
Okay, there we go, okay. We were wondering about that when we were talking about who that person was. There you go.
That was me.
All right. I want to take a question that was brought to my attention about this information. About this information was, and I had somebody ask me this when I was coming out of a church I worship at in town on Sunday. It was, will we give more weight to in-person letters? Excuse me. Will we give more weight to in-person comments, people who attended the information gathering sessions, versus someone who wrote a letter, versus someone who responded to the survey? And I said, at the time, I said, no, I don't think we will do that. However, I will bring it to the attention of the committee. We have a meeting Tuesday night. So I put it out there. I'm of the opinion we should treat all comments
No,
the
they should all
same.
be treated
Yeah.
equally.
But I just figured I'd put it
No,
out there.
because people can't, it would be unfair to give more weight to people who could come in person, because a lot of people can't come in person. I think the whole point was that by letting them do email or the survey or the in-person are all carry equal weight, because all of them are entitled to their opinions that we need to consider, and whatever was most convenient for them is what's important. And that they express their opinion is what's important, not how they expressed it.
So part of my response was that I said we had had a robust discussion about this when we were setting up the first information gathering session, if you might recall, where Aller and I at first disagreed, and it took me a while to get to that point about the letters, and I was more, long story short, I was more concerned about the structure of running the meeting as opposed to just simply reading the letters. Anyway, nevertheless, I said we had already discussed this and said we would give credence to both equally, and I thought we should, I still think we should.
Absolutely.
But because I was asked the question, I said I would bring it here. With that said, other comments? Okay, so as I'm looking at the agenda, we're a little bit ahead of the agenda. Discuss the collated comments from information gathering sessions 1 and 2, as well as comments sent to the committee. We've been talking about this. Dan brought up about the 4th information gathering session. Do we want to make a decision about that? Because
No, we need to, if it's on the agenda, we need to.
yes, so I think we should make a decision about that. Let's talk about that first. And then I think we have to figure out what we're going to do, where we're going to go, and what we're going to do next.
Sure.
I make a motion that we not hold a 4th information gathering session, and that will put on the table for discussion.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, let's discuss.
And I said not. That was a negative.
If we got any responses, we'd get probably the same balance of responses, from different people, for it and against it. So however many, where we are right now. I don't know that would change the feeling. I kind of think it would stay the same.
Yeah, I agree. If it was twice as successful as the first meeting, and it's not likely to be, even at 80 people commenting, it's not enough to tip the balance, because you're likely to have a continuing cross sample of these sort of 4 buckets, if you will. I mentioned this in earlier meetings, the desire to make sure that the accusation like you didn't try. I think there's going to be a set of folks that if we had 10 or 12 or 18 meetings are still going to be out there, that it was always just one less. I picture maybe me or someone in the committee standing up and recapping at town meeting the outreach that we did, the signs, the posters, the drop letters off, the email, and in essence, I'd say at least above and beyond, or a really good faith effort. Bearing in mind that another informational meeting is going to trigger at least 2 more of these meetings, and we've had now close to a dozen of these, I'm in the strong agreement that sort of it's time to spike it and deal with this next big issue, which is like, okay, how do we kind of parse the comments we have?
That does make sense to me. I think what I was responding to is just that, as we're trying to report out, 3 just feels like not a very robust number. So as long as we have other metrics, kind of showing how many responses we got or how many, you name it, just other metrics showing the kind of outreach that we did do, I would feel fine not having any more information sessions.
So if I'm counting right now, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I'm correct, and I think I am, we've had 6 different ways that we've sought information.
Did you include that these are open meetings as well? These 11 meetings we've had
No.
published?
Oh, that's
at time?
interesting, because yes.
We did have that speaker one time come.
They
should be
We've
counted.
only had one.
But I mean, this is
Person
another
wants to
just
speak.
venue.
Yeah.
It's not ideal, often people don't show up at them, but technically.
They've all been
isn't.
publicized in their open meetings, so anybody
So
could
actually,
come anytime.
there were actually 8. Signage, both the electronic signs, posters that Eric's been editing every time we've had to make a switch. We've solicited email messages, which we've called letters. We have reached out to, if I recall, it was 18 different groups in the community. We have had 3 public hearings. We've had now a survey which was put together in 2 parts. One primarily targeted towards residents, of which we had 337 responses as of today, February 15th. We also had a separate survey sent through the school system, which has not been administered to the high school students. I haven't asked why, I left that. I can reach out, but I just haven't done that yet. And then also, Ala and I did an interview with the community advocate. We also have, for each of the public hearings, all of those have been sent with press releases to the media. So there are 8 different ways we've gone through this. So to speak to your point, Dan, I think in the modern era, the public hearing is one way to gather, but I don't think it's the only way. One accurate piece of data, referencing back to what Eric said, is that the survey produced the best responses. The greatest quantity of responses. Whether they are the best responses is left to the opinion of everybody on the committee. As you read the comments and compare them to some of the email responses, in my opinion, they're quite similar. Some of them might be a little shorter in their content, and just to be clear, on the Google survey that we put together, there's no limitation on how much can be written. For the letters, when we first solicited those, we put a word limit on that of 250 words. So I would argue that they're equivalent. I'm not sure what else we can do here. And I'm of the opinion that a 4th one might be redundant at this point. If I thought it would not be redundant, then I would say, well, no, let's try one more. And back in early October, when we were first talking about doing this, I thought 4 might be the proper number. What changed my opinion is the vast number of responses we got to the survey. And culling through the surveys, just as a footnote to that, I've not seen any repeat messages from any residents. So as far as the total number, that number appears to be accurate. So I'm of the opinion that we're at a point where we're ready to
I have
start to
something
make some
interesting.
decisions.
It just hit me. We have 9 people on the committee. Have any of the 9 of us responded to these surveys?
No,
I didn't see anything.
no.
Should we be?
Well, if we go back to what we had this discussion in late September, should we express our opinion, should we not express our
I
opinion?
mean, we're all residents, and
We
we
are.
all must have an opinion.
But we had a discussion about this, whether we should or should not, because we were going to try to just receive the information. Everyone on the committee certainly can do that if they wish. I think that, given that we're going to be making decisions and then each of us voting on what to do, I'm assuming that most of us may want to say something about why you're voting one way or the other. You may or may not, you may decide not to do that. But I'm of the opinion it's time for us to start looking at, as the expression would go, land the plane. I think it's probably time to do that. Any other opinion, discussion about this motion from Phyllis?
Are we still going to reach out to these 2
Oh,
people
no,
and
yeah.
have another meeting where we accept more say just, and then call it?
Well, I think we can continue to accept even information from the surveys and stuff, but we still
Yeah.
continue to get letters or information. This is just saying we're not going to have another
No,
open
open.
meeting. We're not voting to cut off input, community input. The only thing we're voting on right now is whether we should have one more public forum. That's a whole different discussion that we might want to talk about, but right now it's just, should we have another public forum? That was the only thing in my motion.
And these are open meetings, I mean, people can attend them if they want. So,
As far as,
they hear something.
as far as to what Phyllis just said, I would say that maybe we could decide tonight that there would be some point in time where it's like, please comment, aye, whatever the point in time
Well,
might be.
and that's a separate issue, and I
Yeah.
think it's a good one.
Sure.
I think there should be an end date. But that's, right now, all we're doing is,
Sure.
should we have another public meeting? But I think your point's a good one.
To speak to that point, Eric, oh, hold on, Jordan? I don't get, or Ian?
No, I agree that, obviously, the meetings are open, people can continue to speak at any meeting that they attend, and I think it's a good idea at some point, whether tonight or the next meeting, to set an end date, at least for the survey. That seems to be a logical thing to do, just to say we're not gonna leave this thing continuously open.
I think we will have to put a stop to input based on what you want to do, which is land the plane. And so it has to stop before we land the plane. And then we start the discussion of, okay, we're landing the plane and we're gonna make, whatever. So probably, as Eric just said, I think that's something we need to talk about.
Jordan?
I don't have any other comments at the moment.
All right.
Didn't we say that we wanted to get this kind of done by March at the town meeting?
Yes.
So I feel like for us, we need to have a meeting before that to kind of discuss it. So I feel like we need to kind of make that decision soon because it is halfway through
So
February.
what I'd like to do right now, since we've had the discussion about Phyllis's motion, unless there's more discussion first, I'm gonna table what you're bringing up for a moment. I'd like to, let's vote on Phyllis's motion. Once that's done, then we can go back to what Jenna is bringing up. That's what I'd like to do, unless anyone has a different direction we think we should go. All right, so on Phyllis's motion for this committee to not have a fourth information gathering session. All those in favor of not having a fourth information gathering session, can you raise your hand? All right, so we're unanimous about that, okay? Let's go to what you said, Jenna. That survey went online on the 21st of January.
Just to make one comment.
Yep.
The warrant will close on February 22nd. The Board of Selectmen most likely will vote that night to close the warrant. So to get anything on town meeting warrant,
Yeah, can I just make a suggestion?
We were gonna do the update, right?
Yeah, let me just, so just following up on what Wendy said here, I'm moving camera range here. So the town meeting is March 19th, 4 weeks from Saturday. There's already, in the draft warrants, 32 articles or so. And again, it's up to the committee to decide. The committee's charge in total was to make a decision, yes or no, and then if it's yes, to come up with a process. And obviously, you're doing the right thing. You're not really talking, you've gathered information that would inform a decision about the process, but you haven't really talked about it. So one idea, and again, this is just an idea, would be to consider keeping the survey open until like maybe a few days after the town meeting. And this committee doesn't necessarily have to make a decision, but could give a 10-minute, 5 or 10-minute status report of all the work it's done. And you could see if that comes up with any sort of mini flurry of more survey responses. But to get an article in time for like a week from tonight or so, where you don't really have a process, I'm not sure having an article to say yes or no, and then if it is yes, to not have a process, I'm not sure there's time for that. So again, not a suggestion. An idea I had would be that Usually Article 1 or 2 is essentially for the town to hear the reports of various boards and committees. And you already have a published report that will be there, but typically for things like the library building project and other things, I give committees who need to report out a little more dynamically, 5 or 10 minutes. So if this committee wants to, you could give a status report of all you've done and where you're heading, and that could be that you have a goal of by N to make the yes/no decision, and then by N plus 1 or 2 or whatever, to say, come up with the process if necessary. That wouldn't put as much time pressure on the committee, but it would give a chance for the committee to essentially test drive here's what we've done, here's what all the outreach is, find out if there's any pushback about the fourth meeting. But also, if you left the survey open, you could publicize that if anybody at the town meeting or who watches the town meeting hasn't heard about the survey, you got 1 more week, and you could give them till like March 26th. And then I can work with the committee to continue finding out whether the select board feels that there's going to be any special town meetings between March and October, and if or when the select board or this committee feels that there should be a special town meeting between then just for this. There's all sorts of mechanisms to do that. But those are the ideas about process and mechanism that wouldn't put this committee in the lurch to say you have to finish things up and have an article in like 7 days. So anyway, again, your decision, but that's just as I've thought through where you are and remembering back to the first or second meeting to have something to say at the town meeting. That's sort of what I thought seemed like realistic ideas or suggestions.
When I left the meeting on Saturday, I got in the car and I'm thinking, I wonder if we can get an article done and get it to the select board and then have it put on the warrant, etc. by February 22nd. And the longer I thought about it, I reread over the weekend. Started to reread some of the comments, the ones that Ala had compiled, and then I started to look again on Sunday at the survey results. And I thought, I think we need to think about this. I want to think about this a little bit more. Number one, we talked about being deliberate, and I want the residents of the community to know that we considered this carefully, that we didn't go at this cavalierly, quickly, and I don't think we have at all. No matter which way we decide, we're going to be criticized, so we all have to just know that, okay? That's going to happen, okay? And there are going to be people who are disappointed that we go in one direction or the other. With that said, then it's the task of the next committee to decide, well, if we say don't change it, the task of the next committee is, there is no next committee, it's done.
It's done.
If we decide to change it, then there is another task. So, but the longer I thought about it, the more I think it would be too soon. I think it would be too soon to try to reach, as much as I would like, as much as I've enjoyed working with all of you, there's a bit of me, much like all of you, where you're saying, oh, can we move on to whatever the next tasks will be, whatever work we're gonna do. I think we need to be a little more deliberative with the way we go about this. And to drill down and look at the comments again and see if there's another bucket. There is one other bucket that occurred to me, and that is a comment. There was a comment made by a gentleman at the session on Saturday, and he used the word innovation for the community. And in the back of my mind has been this, and we heard this about Mr. Whitney. I want to figure out some way to be respectful of Mr. Whitney, but at the same time recognize what are the symbols in the current seal. That's one. And then the second thing that has completely
Nick, I'm sorry. Are you paraphrasing what this gentleman said, or is this your opinion?
The gentleman said was, he thought we
Talk about
should,
innovation.
what this gentleman said was,
Yeah.
was, his suggestion was return to the 1913 seal. We had that suggested a couple of times.
Mhm.
Return to the 1913 seal. He suggested adding words, and the two words he suggested were adding the word innovation, and the other word was education, which he thinks, this gentleman said, those are two hallmarks of this community. There's been all sorts of innovation beyond just Mr. Whitney's invention that have germinated from Westborough. So might those be other words? Anyway, the things that occurred to me, Eric, with that, and then the other thing that I still don't understand with the color scheme of the current seal is why is it yellow and green with a little bit of bright red? The high school colors are Ranger red.
I think the original seal was blue, someone said.
Yeah.
So I'm
Ross can inform you about what the colors were originally.
Right.
And I don't know if anybody remembers why they changed when it became the town seal.
So,
But the school colors are essentially like maroon, they were maroon and white. And in the past 10 or 20 years, there's been a little bit of navy blue thrown in as well.
Sure.
So those seem to be what the school colors are.
Right, and that changes over, all
Yeah.
schools will change, some
Yeah.
perhaps might change it in some degree. But, so I've always thought that was inconsistent when I first moved here. And I grew up in Worcester County, and we used to play Westborough, and I said, why is it yellow and green? I said, that's not the colors I used to see on the uniforms of the school, for the school. So, but based on this, then I said, okay, I think we need to think about this more. So I would ask everybody to take a second or third look at these comments again. Because I think you digest them, some ideas may pop into your heads about where we go next.
Well,
So good. I'm sorry.
you go.
I've got to run out, and I want to
Sure.
apologize again for having to depart early, it was unplanned, but I want to make a suggestion about how to proceed. The question was brought up that we didn't give a straight yes or no, change it or not, right? And I'm glad we didn't. The question that I think gets most directly at that is question number 2. What is your, question number 3, does the imagery on the town seal? Yeah. And so, much like Allah's done, on the in-person comments, gone through and coded them to say this indicates being in favor of change or keep, I think that our one process going forward is for one of us, multiple members of the community to go through and do similar types of coding for that
Yeah,
question.
I think we need to.
And I'd be happy to volunteer to do that, or we can figure out how to divvy it up. I think ideally you'd have at least 2 people looking at each comment for consistency. This is kind of, back to how we score AP exams, for instance.
Yeah,
For
right.
I'm sure you've done it. Make sure that it's you're on the same kind of rubric, if you will. But I think that would be an important next step for the committee, is to go through and code those, much like Allah has done. And that might be just the next meeting for this group, is to review those, make sure we all agree, and then see what we find from that.
I would like to, I absolutely agree with you. I think we need to code them the same way Allah did. It's a big job and maybe we need to do it. But what I would like to just take this and be a little more practical about this, which is that number 1, I think we should leave the survey open until after town meeting. Give people, and I was gonna say April 1st, John said the 26th.
I was just adding 7 days to town meeting.
Well, and I'm thinking like April 1st.
So it would be open approximately 2 months, if we go to that date.
Yeah, and but if we announce it at town meeting, and that people who are watching town meeting on TV who are there, so that they get one last chance, and we did get a good response to the survey online, so I think we need to leave it open for any additional comments. But I also think that what Ian just said is absolutely essential, that we do that with these, coding all of these, and break it up, because there are a heck of a lot of them. Break it up somehow so that, either 2 people will take, chunks together. And at our next meeting, we start looking at just the gross, how many people said yes and how many people said no. And then start talking about some of the more, what we determine are some of the more thoughtful reasons why people said yes or no. Because ultimately, that's what we need to be talking about.
I have one comment. I think that when we go through in addition and give each response an indication of change or keep, I think we should also add it should be change, keep, or neutral or no clear opinion.
Well,
We can
maybe,
include the-
yes, no, maybe.
The
no,
buckets
you
that
would
we were
have
talking,
to.
yes, but, or no, but, you know, like.
Well, there's yes, no, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe, whatever.
Indifferent.
Yeah, I like it different.
So this idea of coding
Yeah.
is that's a qualitative skill.
Right.
Sorry, it's a qualitative application it's a type of research, much like if we start to use data, it's more quantitative. The kinds of comments we got are just that, they're qualitative. And yes, you could create identifiers for each of those, the codes. And as you start to go through them a little more closely, other codes will pop into your head. You'll start to look and say, oh, wait a minute. There's another comment where the person speaks about the color of the seal, or there's another person who suggests the rotary, because the rotaries come up a few times, okay, as a symbol, just to give you an example.
Well, but I think that comes after the fact. I think what we need to do is get at whether they think that it does, and it's the most important question, I think, of all, is, does it reflect the values of the town? And that's what we need to be looking at, is the yes, no, or maybe. As far as the actual, well, it's okay, but take the cotton gin off. Those are discussions we can have later, but I think even just, and I hate to say this, but even just to cover our butts, we have to be able to say 246 people said yes, and 133 said no, and then there were people who were in other words, we do need to have some hard data when people start coming at us for whatever our decision is. And so as best we can, with qualitative answers, we have to quantify it. Qualitative answers.
Yeah, no, that's really well said. Because when you start to look at it, to quantify qualitative information does give you some. It can be enlightening to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Comments? What do you think?
I think we need to take at least a month between our meetings, except that we have to prepare for town meeting. But we could have a short meeting just devoted between now and town meeting to prepare our sort of presentation or whatever for town meeting. But I think for our assessment meeting, if that's what we want to call it, we need at least a month to go through these qualitative answers and quantify them. So, because we all have other lives except maybe me. I mean, I don't have time, I could probably do it, but everybody else has a life. We're gonna need some time to do that. And so I would say that if we planned a meeting for a month from now or thereabouts to talk about, or just after town meeting maybe, because town meeting's in a month, almost around that April 1st deadline, if we had a meeting where we actually started discussing in depth all of the information we've gathered. But we do need a short meeting of some sort, unless we just want our two co-chairmen to put something together for a town meeting and the rest of us can busy qualifying everything.
I would be more comfortable, I don't want to speak for Alan, but I would be more comfortable to have us meet briefly
Okay.
just to go over what we're going to say at town meeting.
No, I think that's absolutely valuable.
I think it's more, because I want you to, as one of the co-chairs of the committee, I value your input. And so what if we looked at, and we had prior to the interruptions with COVID and everything, and the holidays back in the winter, in the early part of the winter, we were meeting on Thursdays. Hold on, before I do this, anybody have anything else they want to say before I go here? Because we're kind of morphing into where we're going to do our next meeting, what we're going to talk about. And I'm happy to do that. We are well ahead of the schedule here, which is fine. And the conversation's been terrific. As I'm looking at a calendar, Thursday, March,
Third?
what, is it the 3rd or the 10th?
Thursdays this spring are not good for me.
You know?
Any other day is.
I think we had moved to Tuesdays because Thursdays were crummy for some people, but I
Yeah.
don't remember.
The only thing, Tuesdays, the selectmen meet on Tuesday, every
Well,
other
which,
Tuesday.
yeah, but I don't know which ones.
They're meeting next week, so it's like the 2nd and 4th.
So
It was difficult to get a space here, space somewhere in the
Right.
town tonight. It was-
Tuesday nights are tough.
Yeah. Would you rather, so as I'm looking at the calendar, the week of the first week of March is very tough for me.
Well, the last week of February, the week of the 28th.
Yes, that whole week is, for me, is very tough.
Oh, that week?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, Ala would most likely would run the next meeting, if we continue with the alternate thing. So I'm gonna assume that she would run the next meeting. But,
If space or room is a deciding factor, what if we had it as a Zoom meeting? Just so we can, that's the only hurdle.
yeah, I,
I mean, is it possible to find a place, or is it just?
It's just Tuesdays, Board of Health, Selectmen, there's a bunch of people that just traditionally meet on Tuesdays.
But do they meet on the 2nd and 4th? Because we could.
Well, I
have
think
them on-
summer 1st and 3rd, summer 2nd, 4th,
Oh,
and it's
okay,
gonna be
so it's the
driven.
same
Like tonight, the
time.
planning board also met, which is why the big room, I think, was taken. So.
Yeah.
would
But
you,
I have an election March 8th.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I was just saying,
That's
March
gonna
8th
avoid
looks
that,
good. Oops, yeah, okay, so much for that.
how about March 9th? How would that work? That's a Wednesday, or Wednesday's lousy.
March 9th's fine for me.
Works for me.
Really? I didn't expect that. I didn't.
Also, just to throw an extra thing, the way the hearing of the reports goes is that there aren't questions and answers. It is essentially literally a presentation.
Okay.
Because the motion is to hear the reports. There is no action for the town meeting to take on this, so you don't have to worry about, it's important you prepare your points, but don't worry that this is gonna be a big, long give and take.
Okay.
Because this is just you presenting the work, the committee's work so far. And you get your 5 or 10 minutes, and then we move on. So just don't stress out too much about thinking that there's gonna be a lot of questions and answers, because there won't be any. That's not the way that article
But it
goes.
sounds like, unless it's bad for Alla, March 9th sounds like.
Oh, hold on, let me just check, because I asked Ala today in an email what week, oh, you watch it.
I think she said something about the 18th.
Yeah, she said 14th, 16th, or 18th.
Yeah, she said it was
The
something, it
15th.
was, that had an 18 in it.
15th to the
Yeah,
18th.
the 15th to the 18th is not good for her.
So the 9th might be okay.
The 9th would work for her. She said otherwise, anything else would work,
Okay.
okay? So, why don't we say for the 9th? So we'll.
That's just to talk about town meeting.
And maybe to get the reports back from Ross Eldridge and Jane Dunphy.
Oh, right.
If
And we
people
would
have
have
heard
two
back from
additional-
them, yeah.
And then after, at that night, we could then set a meeting to really start digging into the weeds.
So if I frame,
Does that work for you, Jordan? March 9th?
Excuse me?
I was asking Jordan if that
Oh.
worked for her.
Works for me?
all right, so I'm just trying to, because I'm gonna try to present, I wanna be able to send this to Ala, because Ala will take care of getting it posted, et cetera. So we'll accept the minutes from this meeting. And we will hopefully receive, I'm gonna call it correspondence again.
Yeah.
And within the term correspondence, then we can include response from Ross Eldridge and from
Yeah.
Jane
And I
Dunphy.
would
We
say
may
if
have
Ian- if Ian
additional
can get-
survey
Yeah, if
stuff,
Rhian
too.
can get Ross to come, it might even be that he can, yeah, so I think we kind of correspondence and, and something, yeah, something like that should be fine. I'm
Okay.
just thinking, if it turns out that Ian thinks it's better for Ross to come to the meeting, Ken, you might as well hear him then and just
Okay.
get.
And then we'll discuss a planning session for
No.
the town meeting presentation.
At the 9th meeting, but I wanna circle back to something though, which is tonight or whatever, do we want to divvy up the surveys we have now to start quantifying things?
Sure.
Can I throw out an idea? Just because I did something
Yeah.
similar at work recently, where we're trying to improve the developer productivity experience at my job.
Okay.
And so I was assigned to a 4-member team to essentially say, what can we do to improve the software development experience in our part of the company? We did an online survey, and then what the 4 of us did is,
Yeah.
we didn't have 300 responses, we probably had about 40 or 50, but what we did is said, why don't we each independently read through them and try to identify the top 5 or 10 themes, or the top 5 or 10 things that stick out to you. And so so we each did it, and then we each came to the meeting with, and it was remarkable, some people approached it qualitatively and said, 7 people talked about, dev tools, 20 people talked about this, and then I took it from my sense was that the things people cared about were that our development pipeline seems to be unreliable and things like
So
that.
what you're saying is,
9 people read
instead
through them all.
of picking,
Yeah.
let 9 people do it their own way.
Right, do it your own
and
way,
then
come
get
back with what
together.
you think the themes are, and then, if possible, come ready to talk, and I think you'll be surprised that there'll be lots of overlap of themes, but everybody will sort of read it with a different lens, and everybody will come at it differently. But for me, I was surprised how well that worked.
I like that,
Yeah.
because we have 9 people, we may have 9 different
Yeah.
approaches, and that meeting won't be until like after the 1st of April, so. Because we need time to do that, especially if we all need to go through 300 and something of these things.
Okay.
You can read the really small print on this.
Well, we've all
Yeah.
got them on the computer.
I'm sorry the print is so small.
Yeah, I had that clip there, that's fine, I was kidding, I was just kidding.
I'm gonna have to figure out how to get back in there, I'm gonna have to call Nick.
This-
Nick, walk me through this again.
No, it's all good. I
God.
was happy to help. So this is actually from a spreadsheet.
Right, yeah.
And that spreadsheet I'm gonna send to Ian,
Mhm.
so he'll have that as part of the public record.
Good.
So just to recap here, accept the minutes of correspondence, which will include Mr. Eldridge and Ms. Dunphy, planning session for the town meeting, boom, that's it.
Mhm.
Okay, and then we'll worry about trying to code. I'm gonna take the liberty of sending out a reminder about that, just so there's a little process on how we'll do that. In other words, I'm gonna say, because Ian's not here, Al's not here, we're gonna ask you to take the comments, develop your own method of coding,
So you still want us to code them?
please.
All right.
And then show up, and then I would say since there are 9 of us, if we each come in with our top 5 codes, if you have a 6 or 7, because what's gonna happen, you're gonna have more than that, but what are your top 5 or 6? And come with that. John's right. He's very surprised at how similar some of even the language may not be identical, but there'll be a lot of synonyms with that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's gonna be enlightening for us to do that. That's a great idea, John.
Yeah, I
It's
was
very-
surprised how well it worked.
It's
Yeah.
funny that it happened to overlap with what you're doing
Yeah,
at
yeah.
work just now.
Well, I think too, when you read them, some people, and myself included, you like this, you don't like that,
Yeah.
about, so I'd keep the seal but get rid of this, or I
Yeah.
would, those
Yeah, and
kinds
just,
of.
I mean, if you keep, what I did, because I read ours, what I did is I kept either a document open or a piece of paper, like my own, and I would say like, okay, don't like this, and then I would say like, oh, but then there was this specific thing. And then I had them sort of broken down into 10 or 12 categories, and then I looked at the specific things, and I looked to see, well, how many of them were there? And I mean, everybody can do it their own way, but it was surprising. One guy went through and did a very numeric coding, like looking for keywords, this, again, and it was surprising, like, oh, the number of people who mentioned TypeScript, for instance. I said, oh, TypeScript, the theme. He said, yep, it was mentioned by 18 of the 30 people, or something like that. So it was just interesting that we all did it in different ways, but came up with a pretty easily agreed upon, these are the key things that we have to think about and talk about.
There is coding software that exists to do this kind of qualitative analysis, and it's point and click. You could take these comments, upload them to the software, and then as you read them, you can start to make your own comment, your own code, your own adjective, whatever it might be. And then as you see them, you can point and click and add them in. And then once done, then it will give you an analysis of what it is. That's what I used for my dissertation. And it's amazing. So the thing that's different about it is when you're finished, it will give you insights that you didn't think about. That's the thing. So, but this method I think is going to work. So, with that said, anybody have anything else? Then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we'll say Jordan seconded. All those in favor of adjourning, raise your hand. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.